Okay, so Bosch and Lomb came up with a product very quickly to counteract the moves of Johnson and Johnson. And what they did was they came up, they just basically got their old product, which was a standard contact lens, and they basically rebranded it to be daily eyewear. So it's a just a normal contact lens, but they pretended, or they tried to say, oh, you can just throw this away if you want to. So it was a very quick move to try to counteract the move of the competition. Of course, a lot of people found out about it, and in fact, it wasn't quite as comfortable as your typical daily eyewear type of contact lens, because it was thicker, right? So that's an example of just a panic move to try to counteract competition, which was not so successful. So organizations that need to compete, they need to have the ability to make sense of all this chaos that's happening and spot opportunities ahead of the rival. So if you're simply reacting like what Bosch and Lomb did, then oftentimes it's too late. Ideally, you should predict what's going to happen and have your own product developed so that when your competition, or maybe beat your competitor to it, come up with your own product before your competitor does. So it also is the ability to anticipate competitor actions and reactions. So if Bosch and Lomb had its ear to the ground, then it should have been able to predict what Johnson and Johnson was going to do. And lastly, they should have the ability to use this intelligence and insight to influence customers and outperform competitors. So you also need to be able to sell and market and convince your customers about your innovation. So let's go on. According to OME, there are 4 basic ways to create competitive advantage. Number 1, identify what are the key success factors in the industry, and therefore focus your resources on that particular key success factor. So, for example, if the industry is in streaming videos, like Netflix and Amazon Prime, Stan, all of these streaming video suppliers or competitors, what's the key success factor in this industry? Streaming videos. What do you think? What makes you successful in this industry? We took the Netflix case study. Anya, what's your opinion?
I think like Netflix did, like to become closer to its not consumers, sorry, to its I have a brain freeze right now, but like he
customers,
became,
closer to its customers.
He became live streaming with the like offering them a live streaming solution, and I think for those companies it's very important to have like good quality and latest movies or latest videos out there.
All right. So what you're saying is, in order for you to be a successful entertainment provider in the streaming, content streaming type of business, you need to have great content. So the movies that you're showing, something that has to be, very good and unique. You're the only one offering those movies. So that's what we mean by a success factors. In other words, if you don't have that, you probably will not be successful. Correct? So if you identify that, in fact, selecting and showing the right movies and the right TV shows will be the key to success in that kind of business, obviously you need to put a lot of money into it, right? That's what we mean by concentrate resources. Okay. So in the Dyson case study, and he makes vacuum cleaners and other appliances, what do you think is a key success factor? Anybody else? Amelia. Good afternoon. I haven't seen you.
Hey.
What do you think? In the Dyson case study, what do you think is a key success factor?
Uh, their the creativity.
Creativity, innovation, very good. So you need
Yeah.
to be very creative and innovative, come up with these new products all the time. These products have to be completely different. They have to be technologically superior, and the design has to be very nice. They should look like spaceships. As Dyson said, he wanted to, his inspiration was to come up with something really, um, that looks good. By the way, have you guys seen, talking about design, and I'm sorry to interrupt this lecture, but I guess sometimes it's fun to interrupt it. Have you ever seen SpaceX and the astronauts of SpaceX? SpaceX, I think, is the company of Elon Musk, and he's a private company that's helping NASA send astronauts to space. Have you seen the way the design of their ships, etc.? You see that I probably won't have time to show it, but very different um, compared to the traditional astronaut suit. And you compare the astronaut suit of SpaceX, you see how the difference in design is. Anyway, um, whatever it is, whatever key success factor you might have, uh, put your resources there. In other words, pour a lot of money, hire the right people to try to make sure that your resources are focused on that. Another is identify what you're superior in and use this as your way of pounding on your competition. So if you're superior in your software, like Apple, for example, has some superiority in the way the user interface is, they should exploit that and to point that out and how different they are versus Samsung or any other company. The other thing, the third one here is change the success factor by challenging assumptions. So in other words, uh, what people think is a key success factor, maybe there are other key success factors that you could look at and make that the new success factor. And this is where the blue ocean comes in, the blue ocean approach that we talked about 2 weeks ago. And I think we'll refresh your memory on that in a few within this session. But I think what they're trying to say is while people think that the key success factor in a circus, for example, is to have nice animals, elephants and tigers and lions, um, Cirque du Soleil decided no, they're not going to compete in that way. They're going to get rid of all the animals and they'll just focus on people. They're going to focus on a storyline. So they invented their own key success factors, right? And also the fourth one here is innovate, open new markets and new products. Now, this is what Cirque du Soleil did. The typical circus has the target market are children, right? If you go, most people that go to circuses are children, and with parents bringing their children, of course. But Cirque du Soleil said, well, no, we're going to focus on another market, which are adults, and focus on them with adult type of entertainment. And the products they're going to show them, or the show that they will have, will be something that nobody else has seen before. Okay, so you can see that here, number 3 and number 4, the third and the fourth dots are components of the blue ocean strategy, which we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, so when you look at an industry and you ask yourself, will this industry be easy to compete in? Whether can we in fact have a business that is successfully, always growing? And this diagram will show you that it's really not that easy. So the first question you ask yourself is, do you have a well-known product or brand? Okay, so depends on who you are. If you're the market leader, then you can say, yes, I've got a very well-known product and brand. Start from that question. The next question you ask yourself, does it enjoy real or perceived differentiation? All right, so in other words, do people really see it as very different from the competitor? Now, if you're Apple, most Apple consumers will probably say, yes, they're very different. Okay, so the answer might be yes. Now, does it face imminent competition? In other words, it might be different. Like the Apple iPhone, when it first launched, it was completely different. But can we argue that competition has come along? And in fact, you might say that Samsung is doing quite well. They've overtaken Apple in many respects. So does Apple face imminent competition? Yes or no? The answer there is probably no. Sorry, yes. They have competition, and these competitors are very strong, right? So when that happens, the arrow will bring you back to unlikely to offer any growth prospects. So in other words, the iPhone product, Apple is very successful with that, but it really needs a new product because there's obviously competition in the horizon that is very strong in that segment or that industry. So Apple really needs to think of other new things like perhaps a car, an electric car, or some other revolutionary product to compete. And therefore, when they do that, hopefully, if they're able to identify an industry they can penetrate, that they won't face imminent competition for at least a couple of years. So the other argument is that there is really well, some people say there's really no such thing as real sustainable competitive advantage. What do you mean by that? Well, it means that you might have an advantage for a few years, but then after a while, somebody is going to copy it and try to compete against you. So what do you guys think? Is there such a thing as a sustainable advantage? So here we can ask ourselves, if you said no in the first question, which is, do you have a well-known brand? Well, not yet. I might just be starting. And now another way to succeed is I might not be well-known, but the industry is growing very quickly. And in which case, people will probably buy me just because the demand is very high. So they might not be looking at the brand anymore. And if they're perceived to be very similar, they'll just be looking at price. And if the answer is yes to a high growth industry, for example, if you supply face masks, you can imagine that the demand for face masks is very high across the world. That the answer would be yes. Is there active price competition? No. Then there is. If it's no, then there's greater potential for growth. But if it's yes, then it's unlikely to offer growth prospects. So price becomes a factor here. If there's a lot of people dropping their price, right now the price competition for face masks isn't that high because people are buying it no matter what price it's being offered. So that can change, however, as the demand becomes lower and people start to compete using price, then you will have an unlikely growth prospect. Okay? To be successful, competitors need to create value, create competitive advantage in delivering that value, and they need to operate the business effectively and efficiently. So it's not enough to have a really good strategy. If you don't implement it well, if your costs are very high, then you still won't be successful. I think that's the main point of this slide. It starts with a product or service that creates value for the customer. In other words, people will choose you because they see some sort of value, whether it is a low price or your product is very different and it offers a very good, unique advantage, then people will choose your product to start with. And then if you can continue to deliver that value and create that advantage versus your competitors, then that's a road to success. But if you cannot be efficient, then eventually this advantage will not be enough. You need all three, right, to be successful. This diagram here just shows you that oftentimes it's a choice between profit margin and market share. So market share means you're capturing sales from your competitor and you're becoming more and more popular in the market. Now, however, oftentimes to chase after market share, you might have to sacrifice your profit margin. So what is one clear example of increasing market share, and usually what happens is your profit margins decrease? One prime example is when you drop your price. So if you compete on price, what happens is, yes, a lot of people will choose your brand or your product, but then your profit also, the margin of your profit becomes less, right? So oftentimes it's a question of trying to sacrifice profit margin or getting good profit margin but a low market share. Of course, the sweet spot is somewhere here. If you're actually able to obtain high profit margin, and also a very good market share, then that's the winning combination. Large competitors usually have this huge advantage. So Kohl's and Woolworths have a very healthy profit margin, and their market share is quite high when you compare it with the smaller groceries, right? And the reason for that is they have what we call economies of scale. Do you guys know what economies of scale means? Anyone? The other could be that you are thinking too narrowly and you're missing opportunities and being outflanked by competitors. All right, so Porter also identified 3 broad approaches to positioning. The first is to focus on a particular product or service. Second is target a segmented group and provide a wider range of products. Or third is identify and focus on a carefully defined niche with a single product or service. I guess what he's saying here is you can focus on just a limited number of products, but then that product, you sell it to a wider market. Or you could target a small market, but have a variety of products, which is the IKEA approach. And thirdly, you can do both. You can focus on a niche and also have a low amount of products to offer. It would be very, very specific niche, okay, or specific product. You don't have that much variety of your product. If you, by the way, if you only have a single product and you don't have a wide variety of products, that's usually a way to reduce your cost. And that's why that's successful. So here are some examples of how you can use either a low-cost approach or a differentiated approach across the many functions. So I won't go through all of it, but for example, for operations, you might, if you're a low-cost strategy, that's your main strategy, then you're trying to build efficiencies in your plant and you re-engineer processes so that you can reduce the costs of manufacturing. But if you're a differentiated approach, you're looking more at high quality, lowering the defect rate, and providing processes that add extra value into your product. Okay, so very different actions based on your overall generic strategy choice. So again, it's either you do low cost or you differentiate. Okay, at this point, I'm going to divide you in. Oh, well, before I do that, I should perhaps show you the video. Let's watch a video now that explains IKEA and why they're so successful. All right. After we watch this video, I want you guys to have a short discussion about why you think or whether IKEA is going for either of the four strategies. Are they going into differentiation, or are they going into low cost, or are they doing a combination of these? Okay, so let's watch this now.
All right, just gotta hit the launch button. Everybody wins. It's fine too, because I have a lot to say about IKEA. IKEA is massive, both the company and the stores themselves. It's easily the biggest store I've ever been to. Comparing it to Walmart, and I compare it to Walmart because that's another large retailer we all know, and on average Walmarts are pretty big. They're around 100,000 square feet. Well, the average IKEA is more like 300,000 square feet. It's usually 2 or 3 floors. The top floors tend to be where they display all the furniture, and the bottom floor is a giant warehouse where all the actual boxes that contain the furniture can be purchased. But then there's also hundreds of other things on sale in those top floors that you can just pick up right there. But then there's also a restaurant and a play area for children. It's huge. It's somewhat of an odd business, but they're doing very well. They're the largest furniture retailer in the world. I pulled up some facts about the company to help you understand how big they actually are. In 2017, they had 2.3 billion visits to their website and 936 million visits to their stores. All of those visits resulted in 36.3 billion euros in sales, which after converting, it's well over 40 billion US dollars. And clearly that number's been moving in the right direction. In 2017, they opened 14 new stores, bringing their total to 403 spread out across the world, but mostly in Europe. If you're from North America, just think about that for a second. I'm guessing you already perceive them as having a large presence there. Well, that's only 14% of their locations and 19% of their revenue. Narrowing it down to only the US, that's 14% of their revenue. They sell more in Germany than they do in the United States. In fact,